Hello, and welcome to Life More Abundantly podcast, where you will not only learn how to navigate life, but to experience it more abundantly. Your host for this podcast is Pastor Sheena, founder of Abundant Life Holistic Wellness, and she is passionate about helping others to achieve inner wholeness and wellness. Pastor Sheena is a highly skilled mental health therapist, life and performance coach, personal development and spirituality specialist, training facilitator, and speaker qualified to help create a better you. On this podcast, Pastor Sheena will offer all things related to professional development and spirituality from a Christian and psychological perspective. Life More Abundantly podcast content will consistently feature interesting topics that will cultivate holistic development in every area of wellness pertaining to the individual self. So buckle up, tune in weekly, and subscribe, like, and share this podcast.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Life More Abundantly podcast talk show. It's been a while, but I am your host, Pastor Sheena Thomas, and I am wanting to say happy Friday. As you will see, this is a pre recorded show because I have a special guest, two special guests, and we're trying to work with their schedule. But we feel like this will be a meaningful show to bring you some good content. So, in honor of Father's Day this coming weekend, I wanted to do a show dedicated to fatherhood. And I am excited about our guest, Jay Hall, who is the author of God Help Me. As you see, I'm a young dad, and he wrote a book giving practical tools and tips to men as well as new dads. So it's not just for new dads, but it's also a lot of helpful material that will help anyone who is a father. And even if it's not you being a biological father, maybe you have, maybe you're a father of a blended family, maybe you and your partner or your spouse have biological children as well as stepchildren per se. I know today's show will be very helpful to you as fathers, and even any fathers that we have are about to become new dads. I think that you watching this show, that it'll help you to transition into that role, feeling more empowered, more confident, and just more comfortable in this exciting time of life. Parenthood, oh my goodness, is nothing to take lightly. It is, I think that it's the one of the hardest jobs on earth, but as well as one of the most rewarding. I also believe too that it's a reflection of us, our children. They are a reflection of us, and we are to be a reflection of God and teach them also how to be a reflection of God. So we also, in addition to our guest, Mr. J. Hall, we also have a special guest, Bishop Lonnie Thomas, my husband from Perfective Faith Ministries. And Perfective Faith Ministries is here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I brought Bishop on as a guest because he can talk about being a father within a blended family. As many of you know, as I've stated several times on this show, when we got married, I had 4 children. Wow. So it was quite a challenge, at times incorporating him into our family, them adjusting to him and us being a couple. So for any blended families out there, which I know there are a lot of blended families, and I do know that most blended families, if not all, they have challenges. And so we want to definitely talk about that. And even though we are pre-recording today, I would like to say, if you email us or your questions, which I will put the email in the comment section and in the chat, we definitely will follow up with you regarding any questions that you may have. So I am very excited about today. Also, please like and share this broadcast, as well as invite someone to watch who you may feel like is can benefit from this broadcast, or just send them the link and they can just watch it at a later time. Go to our YouTube channel. Don't just go watch the show, y'all. Subscribe to our channel. Thank you in advance. But I really do think that this show would be very beneficial, and I'm excited to do something for men. You know, a lot of times the show, well, I focus here on men and women, but I think that is seldom that I even see a lot of podcasts or anything that's dedicated solely to men. And also, even for any ladies watching, maybe you can also gather from today how to support that special man or the father of your children, or how to help prepare and support if you guys are about to become a parent. So again, we are very excited, and we're just going to bring our guests to the platform right now and just get into the show. So today again, we are having a special guest, Jay Hall, who is the author of God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad. And we also have Bishop Lonnie Thomas, Bishop of Perfected Faith Ministries from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we're going to have Mr. Jay talk about, being a father, becoming a father, being a young dad, being a dad in general. And we will, after that, have Lonnie talk about being a dad within a blended family. And also, Jay, if you got anything to say about that, you can as well. One of the things I didn't do, Jay, before you guys came to the stage, I didn't read your bio. So I want to go ahead and officially introduce our guest, Mr. Jay Hall, now. So his bio reads as such: Jay Hall is an author, educator, and podcaster. He lives in Oklahoma City with his wife, daughter, and two dogs, and a rotating cast of adult children who stop in for meals and occasional dog sitting. Jay recently released his first book, God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad: 10 Essentials for Becoming the Dad Your Kids Need. Part inspiration, part education, part application, the book highlights 10 important characteristics every dad needs and provides practical tips for developing these both in their lives and the lives of their children. He's currently working on the next book in the God Help Me series. Oh, wow. For college students, and messing around with a novel. Oh, I'm excited. After more than 15 years in professional ministry, Jay has spent the second half of his career in higher education, currently serving as Dean of Social Sciences at Oklahoma City Community College and teaching sociology. Since 2021, Jay has hosted and produced is it Oki?
It's Okie. Yep.
Bookcast, Oki Bookcast, a podcast dedicated to connecting curious readers with their next great read through interviewing authors and storytellers connected to Oklahoma. He also co-hosts a monthly book chat show through the broadcast with his daughter, author and screenwriter Hannah Heron. Is that it,
That's
Jay?
it.
Okay. Jay is a regular guest on a number of podcasts talking about everything from books to pop culture to fatherhood and more. So again, I'm excited to present to you Mr. Jay Hall.
Thanks, Sheen. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you again for taking this time to be with us here on Life More Abundantly. I think this is not on my little question list for you, but what I know you put in your book too about what inspired you
Yeah.
to write the book, but tell us about what inspired you to write this book.
Sure. I have 4 kids, like you mentioned earlier, and I guess it's been about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, we found out that my oldest son was going to have his first child. And so it got me thinking about all the things that I hoped my son knew and hopefully learned from me, because those were the things that I wanted him to instill in my we found out, grandson.
Yes.
So initially it was, I'm going to tell him this stuff. And then, that's, how you hear verbal things sometimes. So I thought, well,
Mhm.
I'll write this down. And as I thought about writing it down, I thought about all of the other young men in my life, a lot of his friends, a lot of guys at church who were also kind of entering or in the early stages of fatherhood. I thought, well, if I'm going to write it down, I might as well do something with it. So that's what led to it becoming a book. Moving from just some things I want to be
Wow.
sure my son knew to things that I thought this is worth everybody hearing. I hope that's true. And so, yeah, sat down, actually wrote it pretty quickly because again, it was things that I felt like I knew and wanted to say, and got it out. My goal was to have it out before my grandson was born, and then he
Mhm.
showed up 2.5 weeks early, and so
Wow.
he beat the book, but not by much.
Oh, wow. So how old is he today, Jay, your
He
grandson?
just turned a year in March, so I'm not good at math.
Wow.
14 months, 15 months.
Somewhere around there.
That's it.
Okay. All right. And what's his name again? What's his name?
His name's Andy.
Andy. And Caleb, this is Caleb's son,
Caleb's
right?
son. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. After I read through your book, you did say that we would get to know your family pretty
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I feel like I know them. Yeah. So that's a great story. And you know what I love about your reasoning for wanting to write the book is number one, wanting to pass down information, wisdom to your child,
Yeah.
while you're alive and lively. And
Yeah.
I so that's special. And then taking it a step further, as us Christians are, called to do, serving others, the masses, by putting it in a book, making it available to all dads. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Good. That's great. Um, you, like you said, you have a wife and 4 children. Um, I wanted to ask you, when you first became a dad, right, did you and Kenda plan on starting a family, or did it kind of spontaneously happen?
So when we got married, we were not immediately interested in having kids. Although
Okay.
my wife did tell me before we got married that she had always felt called to international adoption. And so,
Wow.
that's one of those conversations we had before things got too terribly serious. That, was I open to that? And obviously the answer to that was yes. So the first 3.5 years, I think we were married, no interest in having kids, one of these days, maybe, but not right now. And then we were asked by some friends to babysit. And it's something neither of us had ever done. Literally, the first diaper I ever changed was on this little guy. And almost immediately after that, um, suddenly felt like, oh, okay, this might be something we want to do. And so we, at almost the same time, kind of came to each other independently, but said, you know what, I think it's time maybe we start thinking about having a kid. And with all 4 of our children, it was kind of that same process. We weren't ready, and then suddenly we were ready, and then away we went with each kid, especially with our youngest daughter who's adopted. Really kind of a cool moment where I was actually in Nashville at a conference. Kenda was home in Oklahoma City with the rest of the kids. And I felt God kind of whispering, okay, it's time to start thinking about this. It's time to move forward. And actually a verse from Isaiah talking about gathering children from the East, our daughters from China.
Wow.
And felt that kind of compulsion, called her that night, told her that, and she started crying because she'd had the same moment. And so,
Wow.
planned that someday, but to have that moment of God saying, this is the time. And
Yeah.
then a year later to the day, we got our first picture of the young baby that would someday be our daughter.
Wow, that's amazing, amazing. And I did see in the book how you mentioned, adopting Becca from China. Look at me calling her Becca.
You're
And never
crushing it.
met her, but I know you guys call her that, right?
That's right.
Adopting her from China. But I didn't know about that. That's a great testimony about
Yeah.
feeling called to international adoption.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how did that come about when you guys had 3 biological children? Wow,
Yeah.
that's
And that was it. I
amazing.
mean, it had been in her heart since junior high.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Okay, wonderful. So in your book, you talk about several characteristics, like, I know I love, the perfect father, compassion. I'm just talking from the top of my head now, but because I'm trying to get to them. Okay, got to them now.
Crushing it.
Discipleship, faith, um, and also for for you viewers and listeners, the book is about teaching, giving practical tools and tips for fathers, but also I love how you stress the importance of modeling a relationship with
Yeah.
God, as well as teaching. You really go into depth, and it's like quick and to the point, not too much and not too little, about how to help your children develop a relationship with Christ. So I love that. And so the characteristics that you talk about, how did you come up with those? Because there's so many that you could have talked
I
about.
know. I know.
Yes.
So there were a couple of things that were important to me when I thought about putting this together. One was, I am well aware, and Lonnie, you can probably back me up here. Most men don't read a lot, and 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 don't have a lot of time to do it. And so I focused on 10, one, because it's kind of an easy number, but
Yeah.
also I wanted it to be uh, something that wasn't intimidating to read, right? So I didn't want to write a book that was a doorstop. So it's 100 pages exactly.
Yeah.
And that was accidental, but it worked out really cool. But the goal was to find the things that I thought were the most significant elements. I thought about, my experience as a son, my experience as a dad, and then I thought about my son and my grandson. What would be the things that I would most want for them to take on? And so I started with a list of about 20, and just
Wow.
kind of went through and said, okay, can I write about this one? And some of it was, there are things that I don't have, I won't say that I got any of it figured out, but there's some things I have figured out less than I do. And so I wanted to be able to write with integrity. I want to be able to write not from a, hey, you should, but this is the road I've been down. And then also there were just some chapters that didn't fit the direction. So,
Okay.
I wanted to write about work, and just didn't feel like it fit with the other
Mhm.
kinds of things that were in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So it really was just kind of a process of elimination. Then eventually what chapters worked and what fit and what didn't.
Wow. Okay. And I think that with you, the ones that you did include, very appropriate and timely, right? But I was like, but I thought that you would have had some kind of process like that. Like, man, should I include this? Oh, I
Oh
want to
yeah.
include that.
A lot of
Yes.
that. A lot of those
Okay.
internal conversations.
Yes. Okay. Um, so, like we said, your book talks about having you having a relationship with God and teaching your children how to do it. Um, what would you say to new dads or fathers in general who struggle with their walk with God and embracing God as their heavenly Father?
So you sent me this question ahead of time, so I've thought about it a little bit, and I'm still like, oh gosh, there's so much I want to say, and I'm not sure how much. Um, I think all of us, to one extent or another, struggle with the idea of God as Father, because none of us had a perfect father except for Him.
Hmm.
And so I had a great dad, and I talk about him in the book quite a bit.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, my dad's awesome. My dad still had flaws. There were things that my dad didn't do perfectly. And so as I've grown up and grown in my relationship with God as my father, there are things that were true of my dad that I've had to let go of and kind of wrestle through, because we never have the ability to see God with, our lenses are always cloudy, and some of them are just cloudier than others based on the experience that we have with our dads. So that said, I know that there are men who struggle with that more than others because of who their dad was, or the fact that their dad wasn't around. They never knew him, didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about him. And so I'll say a couple of things, hopefully by way of encouragement. One is, I think God is big enough for us to say, you know what? You say you're this, and I don't feel that, and I need you to help me. Um, you know,
Amen.
I think he can handle our doubt. He can handle our struggle. He can handle our lack of faith. I think about Thomas saying, I believe, but help me, help my unbelief.
Yes.
And I
Hmm.
think there's an element of that we say, God, you say you are a perfect father. I don't know what that looks like because I've never seen that. So I need you to show me. And
Yes.
again, God says, ask me, right? And I'm gonna show you who I
Mhm.
am. I think the other thing from a more like practical, let's take steps, is to just look at the things that God says is true of himself, right?
Yes.
The Bible says God loves us. The Bible says God has a plan for us. The Bible says God won't leave us. And to be bold enough to test him in those things.
Yes.
God, again, God's big enough to handle our questions. He let Gideon ask him 2 or 3 different times,
Yes,
right?
he
Is this
did.
the
He
real thing?
fleeced him. Yes.
Yeah, he put up with Moses asking questions. Like
Yes.
he's not going to get mad at us for saying, "Listen, I don't get this, and
Yes.
I need you to show me."
Yeah.
And I think even in place, for those of us who have had good fathers, to be able to say, "I don't know that I believe you are this because
Mhm.
I haven't seen this in my father or in the men who are significant in my life.
Mhm.
So I need you to show that to me." I have yet to see God not step in and say,
Yes.
okay, watch this.
For sure. I love that answer because I think we all have heard or grew up hearing that we're not supposed to question God.
Right.
And a lot of people still believe that. And that is one of the biggest myths that there ever was. In order to gain a better understanding or clarity, that's how we do it, is by asking
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
And it's a way of also engaging with God. So by asking him questions. So I love that answer. You say you had to think about answering it. You did a great job. I love that answer. Yep. Did you do a lot? Did your children have questions like about your journey in coming to God, and tell us about how you came to have a relationship with God?
So I did not grow up in a house where faith was a big deal. And of all things, it was a girl who invited me to church camp. And I was more interested in her than I was in church camp, but you know how that goes when you're 14 years old. And so that's really the first time that I was introduced to the idea of a relationship with God through Jesus. And immediately was like, that's a thing I want to do. So I was 13, by the banks of the Illinois River. A guy named Gary
Wow.
Sharp told me about Jesus. And I would love to say that from that moment on, everything's been great, but that's not been the case.
Yes.
40 years is a long time.
Yes.
So yeah, that was my story. And then, my family shortly thereafter began to come back to church and come back to God. And my dad and I were actually baptized together, which I think is always something
Oh,
that's kind of cool
wow.
that we got to
That
do.
is special.
Um, yeah, so I grew up kind of learning this stuff, not from the cradle, but through youth group, and then felt a calling to ministry when I was in high school, and went to college to become actually at the time to become a music minister, and then moved into student ministry, and ultimately became a pastor and church planter. So you were asking about my kids; they know that story.
Okay.
They
Okay.
know parts of it. Uh, we grew up in a tradition. I grew up in a tradition that was very focused on kind of that point in time. This is when you ask Jesus in your heart.
Mhm.
And so my kids have tried to understand that dynamic,
Okay.
um, because for them, faith has always been a part of their lives, right? They grew up in a house where it was a big deal. And so it's harder for them to access, okay, here's the moment where I flip that switch.
Mhm.
So part of our journey has been helping them navigate what does that look like for them. Because for
Yeah.
me, I do have that moment. I can point to the day
Mhm.
and say, here's the day.
Yes.
My wife doesn't have that same story,
Oh, wow.
but there's no question in her life, right, that she
Yeah.
has chosen to follow Jesus, and
Mm.
that she's a Christian. So with our kids, we've kind of done that conversation to help them understand what it looks like, and really focused as much on what happens after that moment, maybe
Yes.
probably more on what happens after that moment
Mhm.
than
Yes.
the moment itself. Because it's significant for me as their dad that they both see it in who I am, but if they
Yes.
just see it and I don't explain what it is they're looking at, then that doesn't help them very much.
Exactly.
Flip side of that, if I talk about it but don't do it, well, that's not terribly
Mhm.
helpful either, right? Because
That's right.
they're going to model what they see in me. So, um, my wife and I both have really tried to be intentional about doing things that demonstrate who we are as followers of Jesus, and not being afraid to say to our kids, the reason we do this, right? The reason we
Yes.
give, the reason we live this way, the
Hmm.
reason that we don't do these things is not just because it's right or wrong. It's
Yes.
because we're following Jesus and that's where he's going.
Amen. Amen. I like that answer. Lonnie, do you have any questions that you want to ask Jay or anything you want to say?
No, not really. He's pretty much, saying the things that I believe young fathers as well as experienced fathers. I like the fact that he stated that, and made it very transparent that he had a great father, but he was not perfect.
Right.
And again, I believe Sheena told me this on the way over, that in the book, it pretty much let it be known, not to try to be a perfect father. And one of the main things that I tell young men and men in general, because I'm a product of a single parent mother, um, don't ever try to when it comes down to parenting your children or your child to do it in the sense of I'm going to do it better than them, because
Mm.
in some way or some shape or form you're going to end up mirroring and modeling the same characteristics, no matter, even if it's not the exact same thing, but it's going to be in that same vein. So and again, that really went home to me, that understanding that, to our listeners and viewers, that you can be a great father but also have flaws, or be a great father to your children without the expectation of being perfect, without ever, but as long as you're transparent and
Yeah.
explaining to them, daddy had a bad day, or daddy didn't see it that way, or whatever the case may be, and we've got to learn even to get beyond pride and be like, and asking them for their forgiveness, because that includes them versus pushing them away to where they're not want to, open up, or want to understand, or even want to connect, so to speak. So I think this is very much so informative.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. And yes, I do. I agree with that. And I like how you talk about including them, and asking them for forgiveness, and asking them too for their input, because we will not only do fathers and parents in general make mistakes, and we have flaws, right? But isn't we don't always have those things privately outside of our kids' presence. Sometimes, and a lot of times, is in front of them. So I like
Because a lot
that.
of times it's because of them. So
Yeah. Good point. That is true. They won't see it that way, but
right, right. We've been there.
that's true. So and so Jay, with you and Kenda, right, having 4 children, and what Caleb, is he still 26 or he 27
He is
now?
27. Yeah, 27
Okay.
now.
Okay. How have you guys navigated differences? Because sometimes what I've seen from men is that it'll make a man like step back and not always take his rightful place
Mm.
as father, as head, if there are parenting differences. I know that probably wasn't your situation reading your book, but were there times where you guys had differences?
So again, this is another question I really had to think about. I don't know. I'm sure, I will say it this way, because again,
Okay.
my son's 27 and a half years old. I'm sure there were times
Okay.
where we did not
Mm-hmm.
see eye to eye in how we wanted to handle something, but they weren't over big things.
Okay.
And I honestly can't think of a moment where she and I weren't together in how to handle something with our kids. We're very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helped because our kids are very different. So we have a couple of kids that are a lot like her and a couple of kids that are a lot like me. And there have been moments where something happened, and I won't tell the story because I won't embarrass my daughter, but something happened where my wife just stepped back and looked at me and said, "That one's you, go get it." And she just hands off. I don't know how to handle that one. That's your deal. So you figure it out. But yeah, I think we, just we decided pretty early
Mm-hmm.
that we were going to be together on the big things and just have those conversations. But we also decided that there weren't as many big things as sometimes people would tell us there were. And so there was stuff where, if our kid wanted to cut her hair short and put a purple streak in it, well, go crazy. As long as you pay for it, because it's just hair, right? It grows back. And I think because we kind of had that, not laissez-faire, like whatever, but just that mindset that we can't live in a world where everything's a big deal because we have 4 kids and not enough energy. And so I think it made it easier because we didn't have to negotiate as many things together as to how we're going to handle this, because we would just look at it and go, okay, that's not a big deal. We're just going to let that one ride.
Okay, I like that. And that's like the first time I've ever heard that, honestly speaking. But is believable, because you know why? It shows that you guys you have y'all agree on foundational things, and that y'all have a lot of the same values. Like, no two people are the same. Nobody wants a partner who's just like them. That's boring. But I do think on fundamental values and beliefs and principles, you have to have a mutual understanding, and that will cut down on a lot of parenting differences. So I like that. Yes, and good for you and Kenda too to have. If you can't remember, it was not much, right? Because Lonnie, can't we remember some?
Too many.
I'll step out if you guys need to talk through some things real quick.
Yeah, so I think that's wonderful, and that is something that I do say to parents, or and I do say especially men, because we all believe and know and understand from our belief system that the man is the head. He is the covering. He is the priest, and so I do think that it is important for men to be with a partner that you can have those same interests, and your values can align, to cut down on that, because parenting is hard enough. Who needs to be bickering with their partner about parenting and going through the challenges of parenting? So I like that for sure. Great for you guys. Jay, with all that the world has to offer today, right? What advice would you give to fathers about maintaining and developing a relationship with their child, especially like how kids go through different phases? Like Lonnie and I, we have a 12-year-old. He's about to be 13 in August. And I don't know about you, Lonnie, but I've been noticing he's moving into another phase of development, as he should. And so I'm like, okay, well, you're thinking about ways, how can I, maintain a connection with him and things like that? Because today we're competing with video games. Video games were out when we were children too, but today is on another level. We're competing with social media, music influencers. And so how would you, what advice would you give?
I think a couple of things. One, so you're right. This generation of young parents grew up with the things that, or at least were teenagers in an era of the things that you're talking about that are challenges, right? So streaming video games and just streaming content, you have cell phones, you have all those things that are a challenge for our kids, but quite honestly, they are also a challenge for us as adults. And so I think one of the real, kids today have all these problems, and we're saying that while we're on our phone tweeting about it or whatever, and the kids sit next to us. And so rather having that conversation, we're blasting it to the world. So I think one of the things that we have to do as parents is recognize our tendency to fall into those same traps, and to decide, okay, yes, I'm going to limit my screen time for my kids. I'm going to limit for myself too. And I'm not gonna, I see and hear about families that are, sitting around the living room and everybody's on their own device. And so they're together, but they're not present. They're just all kind of doing the same thing. So I think, being aware of that challenge for us, and it's not just our kids that struggle with this, it's all of us.
Yep.
But
that's a good point.
I think it's intentionality, right? I think it is. So talking about your son, it's finding those things that you can have in common and embracing those parts of your life. And honestly, that starts, should start pretty young,
Yes.
And then it just grows, right? So as our
Mm-hmm.
kids move through these different phases, it's really jarring. And I
Yes.
see this, and you do
Yes, it
too,
is.
when, a kid's 13 or 14 years old, and this parent who's kind of been this just shadowy figure that comes in and out
Mm-hmm.
and goes to work suddenly shows up and says, "Hey, I want to be your buddy."
Yeah.
They don't know how to navigate that any more than we do. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, that intentionality, that's not to say don't do it if you haven't
Yeah.
up till now, but I think there's a different way to navigate that.
Yeah, it's a
But I think
different dynamic, right?
absolutely. But I think finding those places where we can have in common. So, if your kid's into games, maybe you need to do some of that too. I actually was having a conversation with a colleague whose son is really into Fortnite and wants her to play with him, and
Mm.
so she's given it a shot. And she was
Okay.
talking about what a struggle that can be. Um, but I think it's finding those things in common and finding ways to pull away from the screen
Yes.
and connect, right? So if you're into basketball and your son's into basketball, your daughter's into basketball, don't just watch games,
Mm-hmm.
right? Go play, go out in the
Yeah.
yard and give it a shot. Or go to a game together, even if it's like the
Mm-hmm.
local college or local high school. Go watch it, because then you get to share that experience instead of having a passive experience where you're just
Yes.
watching it on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and dads, sometimes that means we have to get into things that we may not necessarily be all that into,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I have two daughters. They are both huge fans of Taylor Swift, to no one's surprise, because they're the right age to be fans of Taylor Swift. And while I will never be a Swiftie, I know a whole lot about her music and a whole lot about the Eras tour and a whole
Yeah.
lot about all these other things, because that's something that
Wow.
we can talk about together. Because I am a musician,
Mm-hmm.
I'm into music, and so
Yes.
we can talk about some of that. Again, not to the extent that they would like to all the time, but it's not something I would naturally have gravitated to. But I got two daughters who are in their
Yes.
20s, so
Mm-hmm.
that's a conversation we're going to have. So that's
Yes.
I think it's a long way around, but I think it's that intentionality of saying,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to allow them, and maybe that's more harsh than I mean it to be, to kind of shell up inside this
Yes.
social
Yeah.
media and video game world. I'm
Exactly.
going to intrude on it. I'm going to intentionally spend time and call them
Yes.
to spend time with me. So that's meals, that's shared experiences, that's car rides to wherever you're going, whatever that is. But we
Mm-hmm.
take the opportunities we have to
Yes.
connect and stay connected.
Yes, I like that, and that is a great point. I love how you talk about getting into the things that they're interested in, because a lot of times as parents we do that a lot, and we know we have to pull them into the things that we need, that they just we have no other choice. We say sometimes, right?
Right.
So it's good to give that back to them in return. I think that's really good. I just have two more questions, because some of my questions you answered as you were talking. I was like, okay, Jay. Um, what about the dad that, I have encountered some fathers, and I know Lonnie has, and maybe you have, that they have not had the best connection with their child or their children. Some of them are in the life of their child and never had that connection, but a lot of them are not.
Mhm.
And maybe it's because of divorce, breakups, custody issues, whatever, finances, but they want to get back in their child's life, but just don't know how to go about it. What advice would you give?
I think the first thing I would say is own it.
Mm.
Right. Don't be afraid to say, and Lonnie, you mentioned it earlier, don't be afraid to go to a child and say, hey, I've not been here in the way that I wanted to be here.
Yes.
Now, again, even if that's something that's not necessarily in their control, right? If it is a
Mhm.
custody situation or divorce situation or an incarceration, all these things that we see happen,
Yeah.
to own it with that child, again, in a way that's appropriate. If they're 4, that's going to be a different
Yes.
conversation. If they're 15. But to just say, I've not connected with you in the way that I want to, and now I want to take these steps. And I think also be real specific in the steps you want to take,
Yes.
right? So don't just
Yes.
say, I want to be in your life more, because what does that mean?
Yeah. What
Right?
does that look like?
But
Mhm.
I want to connect with you, and if that's, hey, let's go grab coffee once a week, or hey, can I drive you to school so we can talk during that time,
Mhm.
or if they're separated, right? Can we FaceTime? We live in a world where we can literally get phone
Yes.
calls from the top of Mount Everest.
Yep.
We can connect with each other.
That's the truth.
So, can we FaceTime? Or can I send you videos? Can I send you letters? I mean,
Mhm.
finding those ways
Yes.
to do connection in whatever way it looks like. Because I try to be real careful in the book when I talk about presence, because this is something I talk about a little bit.
Yep.
Um, to recognize that there are dads that aren't in control of their ability
Yes.
to
To be
be
present.
connected in the way they want to be,
Mhm.
whether that's
Yep.
through work or through life or situations or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't release us from the responsibility of giving it a shot.
Yes.
So for
Good.
that dad who's
Mhm.
saying, I want to go there, I want to get back to it, I think you've got to be honest with your child or your children. I think you have to do it in a way that doesn't, if it's because of a divorce or custody thing, you have to be careful about how we engage the other parent that's
Yes.
involved. So, we never want to say, well, your mom will let me talk to you, right?
Yeah.
That's not healthy for anybody.
Yes.
But to find ways to do that. And like I said, I think we have to be careful about the intensity with which we come at it.
Yes.
Because, if our child is 14 or 15 years old and suddenly we feel like, oh, I've only got 3 years left and then they're going to be,
Mhm.
doing
Yep.
whatever,
18.
I've got to get in there.
Yeah.
Well, man, at 15, they've got a life they've figured out a little bit.
Yes.
Now they don't
Exactly.
know what
And
they're
you have to
doing.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's the
we've got to
truth.
find ways to ease in
Mm.
and to fit into the world they've created and not say, okay, now I want you to just come be with me.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
they've begun to develop that autonomy. And the last thing I'll say, because in the question you said something about being afraid of
Yes.
connecting back into that. And there's an idea that's gone around, and I've seen it in movies, and I've heard different speakers talk about it. But this idea of 20 seconds of courage. And if
Mm.
we can just have 20 seconds of insane courage,
Yep.
we can do just about anything, because that's all it takes to
Exactly.
take that first step.
Mhm.
So dad, if you're afraid of how your child is going to react when you encounter them, and you may be right to be afraid, like there may have been things that happen that,
Mhm.
that make that a little more terrifying. 20 seconds of insane courage, right? You send the text message, you make the phone call, you walk into the room, and then once you're standing there, you got to say something. So you might
Yes.
as well just
That's
take that
right.
next step and say the thing that you intended to say. That's easy for me to say from here.
Mm.
But I've had those moments too, not necessarily with my kids in
Mhm.
these situations, but where I had to say, okay, if I can
Yep.
just be brave for 20 seconds,
Yes.
then
Mhm.
we'll move forward.
Yeah, and get it and do something. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for that, because that's another thing that I say to kids who talk about their parent not being there, especially
Mhm.
fathers. That a lot of times it's not always, oh, they don't want to be there, they don't care. It's not always that. A lot of times it is rooted in fear,
Yeah.
and them
Yeah.
just not knowing how to take that first step. And it's not too many people talking about how to help dads in that situation. So that's another reason why I'm grateful for your book. And I was telling Lonnie that I was going to gift your book out to I'm about to say both of my sons are fathers. So I have 3 sons, one is a minor, but the 2 adult ones are fathers. And I was going to get one of my sons your book for Father's
Oh,
Day.
awesome.
So, yep. So, dads, go and get the book. Go and get the book. It's a quick read, but it's very informative. I love the devotionals and how you tell them, even though this is a quick read, take time to slow down
Yeah.
and read, do one chapter at a time. How you have the reflection, and then you even have some call to actions. I don't think that's not what you call it, but that's what it is. Like
Yeah.
is it put it into practice, or what? How do you refer to it?
One is ask for it, and the other is something like do it or something.
Yes, something like that. But
I should know that off the top of my head, shouldn't
that's okay. You're calling to you're
Yeah.
giving them some practical things to actually do, because we read stuff all the time. Ooh, that was good, and then we forget about it. But if
Right.
we put it into action, it'll help that applicable knowledge stick around in our heads a little more. So
Well,
I
and it was
love
really
that.
sorry.
Go
It
ahead.
was really
No, go ahead.
important for me, because part of the point of this is not just that we develop these things in our lives, but that we're intentional about trying to develop them in the lives of our kids. So one of the things I wanted to do at the end of each chapter was say, this is what it looks like at your house,
Yes.
not just with you, but if we're talking about service, this is what service can look like with your 3-year-old, right?
Mhm.
Or your 13-year-old or whatever.
Exactly.
So that it's not just, well, that's great, and I'll think about that one of these days when my kids are whatever
Mhm.
age, but that this is stuff we can do right now.
Yep, right now, at whatever age, we find a
Yeah.
age appropriate way to get it done, for sure. Before we ask you about, how can dads access your book, and also ladies, any ladies watching, all of the things that Jay have talked about, things that Lonnie have mentioned. These are also some ways that some tips you can bring to the man in your life to support him in fatherhood. Maybe some ladies want to gift the book to some fathers that they know, or fathers to be. So before we ask you, Jay, to tell us how to get a copy of your book, I love at the end you talk about the ride home. Oh my. And Lonnie's going to crack up when he hear this, even if it's internally and he knows why. But I want you to talk about the ride home. I see it so
Yeah.
much. And what I really see is the repercussions of the ride home. So tell us what the ride home is.
So the ride home, this started. So I teach sociology classes. One of the classes I teach is sociology of sports, which means that I work with a ton of college student athletes. And so as I'm studying and trying to figure out things that will help connect to them and help them connect to the bigger world, years and years ago now, I ran across some research that asked 10,000 college athletes, what was your favorite part of being an athlete as a child, so as a youth athlete? And as you can imagine, those answers were all over the place, but involved mostly teammates and being with my friends and whatever. But they were varied. They also then asked them, excuse me, what was your least favorite part of being a youth athlete? And the overwhelming majority of them said the ride home.
Wow.
And so then they began to ask them about it. And what they learned was that on the ride home, mom or dad would break down everything they had done wrong in that game or set of games. And as athletes, and it's funny because when I talk about this in my class, again, with a room full of student athletes, all these heads start nodding. And I have students from all over the world. And so this is a universal thing, right?
Yeah.
My Latin American students, my European students, my African students are all like,
wow.
Yep, this happens. And the athletes talk about, because we knew what we had done, right? We knew that we swung at a curveball that we shouldn't have. We knew we swung at ball 4. We knew that we shouldn't have turned our head, whatever it is. And so in those moments, what they're saying is we need our parent to be our parent and not our coach in that moment. Because all that does is make us feel worse about the mistakes that we made. So, and it's not exclusive to athletes. Now, the research was exclusive to athletes, but you think about musicians, you think about kids that are in drama,
that's what I was
you think about debate, or whatever it is that you do, to have that breakdown after the fact, where it's your Monday morning quarterbacking what your child has done in whatever field, is a struggle for them. And I'm a competitive guy. My kids were all athletes. I coached my boys in a lot of what they were doing. And so I read that, and immediately my thought was, do I do that? Like, if you were to ask my sons as we're driving home from a basketball game, driving home from a baseball game, would they say, yeah, dad does that? And I realized that maybe not as bad as I was afraid it might have been, because my kids were still fairly young and kind of shifting from we're playing for fun to a little more competitive. But I committed myself at that point to say, I don't want that to be true of my kids, because the reality is a very small percentage of our kids are going to make it to and play in college, and even a smaller percentage are going to make it to the pros. So it might as well be fun, right? I mean, we want them to do well. We want them to succeed in what they do, but we also need to recognize, my older son couldn't hit a curveball to save his life. He wasn't going to be playing baseball even in high school. So I didn't need to break that down for him, because that hole in his swing was never going to get fixed. He's just too big and lanky, whatever. So I committed at that point that I wasn't going to do that. And so what I did, for those of you who may struggle with this, that maybe this will be helpful for you. When we stepped off the field, and I literally would think, like, I coached baseball for almost 20 years between my two boys. When we walked out of the dugout, so once we got off the field, we got everything picked up, and we moved from the dugout to the pathway or the road to walk to the car, I flipped a switch, and I was no longer coach. I was dad.
Okay. Intentionality.
And when I was dad, we didn't break it down. Like, we weren't going into film room with dad, right? That's coach's job. Now, if my sons wanted to talk about it, we'd talk about it. and I would be real careful to be as positive as I could in those and not just agree with them. Yeah, you really shouldn't have swung at that. That tried to be careful with that kind of thing. But most of the time it was just, man, I love watching you play. And man, isn't it fun that we get to go do this? And isn't baseball the greatest, even though today we got beat by 10 and it wasn't a
Yes.
whole lot of fun. And I will tell you, the choice to not engage and start those conversations led to a lot of very quiet car rides home.
Yes.
Because
Wow.
because they're competitive. And if things
Yes.
didn't go well, they were
Mm-hmm.
stewing on it, but it
Yes.
wasn't going to help for me to go, yeah, you're right. That wasn't good.
For
And
sure.
it's hard.
Wow.
If you're a coach, if you're a
I can
dad, if you're
imagine.
competitive, if you're a
Yes.
mom, I mean, let's not pretend that's just a
Yep.
male thing. Um,
Exactly.
it's
That's right.
tough, but I think it leads to kids burning out and wanting to walk away from these things, or wanting to find things that we don't know anything about so
Yes.
that we
Yeah.
can't coach them.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
which I think then kind of leads to video games and some of this other stuff we've talked about, because
Mm-hmm.
I know a whole lot about basketball, I know a whole lot about baseball. I don't know much about Fortnite. So if that's
Yes.
the road they're going to go down, they can escape my coaching instinct.
Yes, for sure. I love that. And I thought that was great transparency on your end.
Mm.
To like you said, that's what I like about this book, y'all. Like you said, it's not a don't do this and don't do that. It is, you know what, here's how I messed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you learned from it, and the things you talk about are common things that parents or fathers usually, struggle with or have a flaw with. And the thing about the ride home, I'm going to go look for that research, but it induces and enhances anxiety, and there are very different aspects of anxiety. We got OCD, we got generalized anxiety, social anxiety, and then there is perfectionism. And the thing is that parents, like you said, because moms and dads do this, we're who they're looking up to. So what we say and our feedback, it carries
Oh
like the
yeah.
most weight.
Oh yeah.
And even a lot of times, especially male to male, female to female, a lot of times it's going to carry more weight than the coach or the dance instructor or the music instructor. So when we do, and it's not to say don't, give them their feedback. Like you said, Jay, sometimes they would want to talk about it, but
Yeah.
we have to be mindful to do it in a constructive way, like we would anybody else that wasn't our child or our family member, because it makes them, think that they got to be perfect, and not just at sports or music or whatever, but at everything.
Yeah.
And then it causes them to be in therapy. And if we're
Yeah.
wanting to read Jay's book that talks about that you don't have to be the perfect dad, we can't expect to have the perfect kid either.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I really do thank you for sharing it. And not only do you share the mistake, but you share how it can be improved upon in a decent way. Yeah, and is pretty interesting to hear that that children from all over the world had that same
Yeah.
feedback. Wow, that's profound. It really is. So now, how can we get your book?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Amazon is the easiest. So if you
Okay.
but I will encourage you to search "God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad." Don't search Jay Hall, because you'll never find
Okay.
me. Because it's too common. It's too easy.
Yes.
I also have a website where you can go, jhallwriter, WRITER.com.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And you can go there, and that'll link you to the book. Also, I do, if you're ministry folks and you're wanting to get it for a men's group or for Bible study, we do bulk discounts
Okay.
on large order. So you can reach
Good
out
to
to
know.
me through the website, and I can help connect you with that. But that's the easiest way to get me. If you want to connect with me on social media, and we can kind of negotiate some things that
Yes.
way, I am at Okie Bookcast, OKIE Bookcast,
Mhm.
everywhere. Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the places. And love connecting with folks, love talking about dad life and lots of other stuff as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Everything you said was so informative, so helpful. Lonnie, do you have any questions or anything to say to Jay before he leaves us?
No, again, everything is informative. And Sheena was saying that the laugh internally was the ride home, because our son Lonnie the third There are pros and cons and everything. My ride home, I thought about when he first tried out for basketball
Hmm.
and was devastated. Where so to the point when
Yes.
Sheena and I talked, she said he never told me, and I said, and I kind of used the late Kobe Bryant, that yeah, all of the struggles that he went through, and I said no one becomes great or experience greatness without failure. You got to
Yeah.
learn from that.
Yes. That's
So
true.
with that, I think that ride home, something clicked because he wanted that. I mean, and you can see the drive and the passion.
Yeah.
And then me and Sheena and I rather, we did everything in our ability to, uh, to advance and enhance, his ability to get better at basketball. So then this past school year, you've seen it, and I'm not talking about something years ago. I'm
Yes.
talking about in
Yes.
2020,
Hmm.
uh,
Less than a
2022
year.
to,
Yes.
to 2023, 2024 school year, you've seen a vast improvement. But again, my ride home with him, which we had many where, I had to always be mindful, and the therapist that's in Sheena will always remind me, about, you got to be this and that and that and this. So, but I think about that one because it really, I never shared it till now, being very transparent. It, how can I say this? It really touched my heart where it made me emotional, like, because as a father, you want to rescue your child and
Yep.
Yeah.
you want to give them the superpower.
Yes.
If you know that you were an athlete, and he asked me certain questions, and I said, I said I didn't have the advantage of how they have basketball courts and community centers and things of that nature, living
Hmm.
in an urban area. But I said, but we had a public playground, and I said every
Yeah.
time it was good enough, far as even if it was raining, I was drying the basketball court with my basketball because I was the only one out there. And again, just having that, you don't have the fathers have to give them some superpower that does not exist. Just the interaction, ear to ear, and most importantly, show me your heart and
Yeah.
be very open,
Yes.
vulnerable, and then move forward with that. You don't know, may not know the next step, but if you
Yes.
open up, it opens up the door for conversation with your
Yeah.
child. This
Yeah.
is great.
Yes.
I really like
Wonderful. Yep, that is so true. And I want to thank both of you guys for being on here because like I was saying before I brought you guys to the stage was that I don't see a lot of, shows out there just talking specifically to men. You'll see that about women all the time. But things that's like specifically talking to men, I think is more needed in society. I do because also some men won't reach out for help or
Mhm.
express that they are struggling with something or they want to just develop in something. It'll take for someone else to bring up the topic. So I think that that's really wonderful that you're talking about this today. Yep.
it.
Um, Jay, do you have any final thoughts?
I would say two things very quickly. I promise they will be quick.
Yeah. Okay.
There's two big ideas in the book. One is the whole thing is based on Second Peter, where the Bible says that God gives
Yeah.
us everything we need for life and
Mhm.
godliness, and I am convinced that that counts for fatherhood too. That
Yeah.
God gives us everything we need to be the dad that He wants us to be. And then the last thing I will say is the last words of the book, and I think they're just the most significant thing that I can say to any dad, anywhere, anytime.
Mhm.
Keep
Yes.
showing up.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
I
Flaws
agree.
and all,
That's
right?
it. Whatever
I
you
agree.
got, just keep showing up.
Yes. Well, Jay, we thank you again for joining
Yeah.
us. And you have a happy Father's Day
Thank
too.
you.
You
Yeah.
and
Lonnie,
Caleb.
you too.
Okay.
Yes. You as
Same.
well.
All right. Take care,
Thank you
Jay.
guys for having me on.
All right.
All right. Good night.
So, Lonnie, want to talk now, everyone, about blended families. Um, I know that that's a huge issue out there. A lot of people are in blended families struggling to navigate blended families. Families have even broken up and fallen apart because of not having the tools to navigate being in a blended family. So, as I said earlier, when Lonnie and I got together, I had 4 children, and he actually had none. He wasn't a parent. And then later on, we had a child together. But before our child was born, and even after, it was a challenge at times, blending and integrating as one family. So I want to ask you, what would you say to the family that's in that situation, like that's struggling to navigate having a blended family? How would you what tools would you give for them to overcome?
Well, to the male as well as the mother, you have to communicate. With Sheena and I, it was communication. Now, when I say communicate, it's not communicate in the sense of if I express myself and express my viewpoints, that we're going to both understand and be open, not only open, but understanding and agree. There are going to be plenty of times where you won't agree because you're coming from two different spectrums, two different areas of the spectrum. So what I'm saying is be intentional or in the sense of letting it be known this is where I stand at, but also be willing to be teachable, be willing to have an open ear to listen and to hear the other party's viewpoint. Why? Because how can I expect you to understand or be willing to listen to my viewpoint where I'm not showing the same willingness to you? And that's some things that I struggle with because in our viewpoints, we just automatically assume that we are right. We convince ourselves that we are right and how we view things and how we see things. But again, I had to learn that. Listen, I've got to learn to be able to be open to having an open ear to listen to what Sheena has to say and her viewpoints for the purpose of that we can co-parent together with the blended family. But again, communication, that's the first thing I would have to say, because if you don't do that, again, it will be almost in a sense a war within the household, a war within the home, and you're doing more devastation and destruction to those children that will hear or see, and even if it's nonverbal, they'll sense and the tensity of the atmosphere, rather it's a ride home or rather it's just a living room or a dinner that no speaking. They're going to, and then the thing is with children, they automatically assume that it was something that I did. They go right back to the last thing that they may have done that the parent was disappointed in. So again, even as I told Jay that being open, open to talking to the child, and letting them know when you mess up. Why? Because we hold them so much accountable. We've got to show that I'm in a place where I can be held accountable as well. So when you're talking about being in a rough place or being in something that is not familiar or where it is familiar, but you don't have the experience or you don't have good example setters, communication. And by me being a believer of God, I can only, not try to knock no one over the head with the Bible, but prayer.
Yeah.
You gotta pray about your shortcomings, because this is going to expose your shortcomings. Rather, you view them as shortcomings, and it's going to expose and reveal unto you where you need to grow and mature. And one thing, and I'm gonna close this out for you, Sheena. I can honestly say, since being younger in our marriage and also not having children, the God honest truth, I wouldn't change how our co-mingling regarding blended families, because I learned a lot what not to do based off of my failures. I learned a lot, and it taught me, because in one of my phrases I always tell Sheena in the early, I don't like favoritism or anything that appears to seem like favoritism. So I had to be the example setter of that. I'm not going to show favorites among the children, and by that being a pillar or foundational piece for me, it traveled right into when we had a child together, that you would not see the same thing. And again, sometimes we see that even as siblings, we see favoritism. Mom likes this one or dad likes this one more than the other. I'm sorry, y'all, my light have cut off. But that you don't want to show that. So communication and prayer, communication, and keep on communicating, even if it feels like, and be honest and say like, I feel awkward or whatever the case may be. Why? Because the other party may have the ingredient to help you to overcome that shortcoming, and vice versa.
Amen. And as I think back on our experience, there was a lot of trial and error. I think that
Absolutely.
when we would try stuff and when it didn't work, then we would try something else.
Mhm.
So, that it takes that sometimes. Sometimes if, maybe whatever you think what might work, if it doesn't work, that's okay.
Well,
Because
it may
that's what
work for someone else and not
yeah,
you.
that's true. Yep. You'll look at someone else and say, okay, well, they did this. Well, let's try that. But maybe, yes, it won't work for your family. But if you just keep trying different things, eventually you will come settle in the place for your family and for the specific issues that y'all have. Because I think with blended families, a lot of the issues are the same. And because they're the same, we try to address them the same as someone
Mhm.
else when it may be the same issue, but we are not the same people. We don't have
Yes.
the same
Correct.
actions, dynamics in our house, or whatever. So we may not go about it the same way. But being committed, and like Lonnie said about communication and prayer, I think that is what helped us overcome. And was there times that I even said to him, if you want to leave, I understand,
Mhm.
and I think, and I'm sure that he probably did want to throw in the towel sometimes, whether it was leaving or just shutting down verbally. But keep trying. That's what family is. It's your commitment. It's your dedication. When something don't work out, that don't mean we give up, but we keep trying because we love our family.
Absolutely.
I thank you for talking about that. Um, what would you say to children who have a step parent, or especially a stepfather? Because that's another thing too. I do think it's harder for men who come into the family
I
than
agree.
for a woman who comes into the family. You agree with that?
I agree. Hmm.
Yeah.
First and foremost, and again, I applaud all single mothers. I come from the product of a single mother. I applaud it 100%. Women are the backbone. Just like man is the head and the covering, women are the backbone of the family. Um, but I want to say the spokesperson for two-parent homes. I am. Um, and that's why, again, even with our child together, I learned so much even in that from the four children we co-parent with as well as to now. Why? Because like you said, every child is different. And if you try to approach it the same way as the last one, you may fall on your face. Um, but when it comes down to when the father or the male come into it, what I say to the children, just like I told our children that, because every situation is different in the sense of why the other parent is not there. And when I told them, I said, I'm here to do what your father either will not or cannot do. I'm not here to take his place because one, he's still alive and you still have communication with him. So I'm not here to take no place. And I think, and again, they may not understood it at that moment, but remember, when they get older and
Yeah.
children now is they're
Come back
older, they're grown, and they're
feedback.
having their own children.
Yep.
The feedback was different from all of them. Christopher was like, "Oh, Mr. Lonnie, it wasn't that bad," But if I look at you as the enemy because my father's not around, and I had to learn it the hard way that no matter what love and what you showed, they want it from their original, well, not original, they want it from their biological father. So it is a little challenging, a little hard, because now it looks like mom brought somebody else in that's not my father. So again, as the male, you have to be understanding and understand that, for the lack of a better term, it's a package deal. You cannot have the mother, brothers, um, and not accept the children. You cannot. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yes, it
You
is.
cannot have the mother without understanding that it's all or nothing. And a lot of times we come in with our own objectives and our own reasoning on what we think we're going to do, or that we're skilled enough to hide that. Children, no matter how young or inexperienced they may be, they sense it, they pick it up. And even if they can't comprehend it and fully explain it, they know it. So again, fathers and males, that when that you got to just be understanding, in the sense of that this child is not fighting you. They're fighting the fact that I don't understand what's going on, even if it was explained to me. And most importantly, this is not what I want. It's not that they're rejecting you, even though it feels like it. I'm going to tell you the honest God truth. It feels like it. But the more you, as Jay said, you continue to step up to the plate, and using the analogy of baseball, step up to the plate as the man, and be the model male that they need to have in their life. It will eventually get easy. It will get easier.
Like he said, that's
You have to. You have to, because again, it's bigger than your feelings. It's bigger than, there are going to be things that are going to be said that you may not like. There may be things that they may say, they may blurt out, "You're not my father," and it's not for you. One, you have to always maintain standards and integrity of you don't go back and forth. You establish authority, far as, listen, this is not how we raised you, this is not how this household is going to go about things, and so on and so forth. But again, I wouldn't allow you to disrespect your father in front of me, nor would I allow you to do that to me. So again, brothers, by being a challenge, again, the Bible speaks about how it says how husbands are to love their wives, but the same thing applies to children, whether they're biologically yours or not. And why it's asking for the love? Because there are going to be challenges, there are going to be things, there are going to be obstacles that are going to come into play where you're going to have to love them in spite of. Love them, but also follow it up with prayer. That again, that you continue to uphold the standard of God, and also that you continue to be, because again, the enemy wants you to walk away. So the child will say, "I knew all along that he, that's all it took." No, it's going to take more than that. And then when Sheena told me that, I said, "No, it's going to take more than what I'm going through." And I was going through hell on earth, we have a great relationship now, all four of the children, as adults, because now we can speak to each other in a sense of it went from adolescence and into teenage to now adulthood. Now I can talk to you and help you and give you advice in a sense of, as a parent, from father to father or father to mother. But again, it won't come overnight. But again, you have to understand that it's not an attack on you. It's an attack on the simple fact that they did not ask for this, and that they want their other parent that is absent, rather it's court or whatever the issue may be.
And also, in how you was talking about is not don't is not about you. I think, that's something to keep in mind. Like, don't take everything so personal, even though it does seem like it is directly towards you. But there are issues a lot of times before the step parents show up.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that person coming into the family don't know, or they have yet to learn, because you will learn it. But that is one of the biggest reasons why it is okay to not take that stuff personally.
Absolutely.
and even if they do mean some of the things that they say, but it's still not to say that it's going to always be like that, and that y'all can't overcome whatever challenges or differences that you initially had. There were times where I thought that we wouldn't overcome it. I don't know. I mean, it was rough, and it was also things that I would not have never expected to happen, or because it seemed like it took them a long time to
Mhm.
embrace you, right? And I think that was the biggest challenge for me. And I know we're not the only family that's going through that, but consistency helped us as well.
Mhm.
It
And
really
with that, it you know, is a testimony to parent and families that are going through now. And again, I always say this, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that when I said I'm a proponent, I'm the biggest cheerleader for two parent homes. Um, Daughters need to see a father in place consistently, no matter what, no matter how they may treat you. May they go through mood swings and don't want to be bothered, or feel like you don't understand or don't believe, or understanding what they're going through and how they feel, and or you may think that you just oblivious to whatever is the current thing that they're going through right now. To be the model of what they're to look for in a mate,
that's the
you
truth.
know, and that's the truth. And the same thing with male to male. You have to be the model of consistency to show what a man does and what a
Yeah,
man is, and the standard and the principles that a man stand on, no matter what, no matter how hard life may hit you, and no matter what situations may come or go. We have plenty of laughable experiences that I laugh about, and I
laugh
believe
about
Sheena,
that.
don't like me saying, but for those that are watching, if you ever have free time, stop past our Facebook page for Perfected Faith. I tend to sometimes testify of our hard times, but it drew us closer. Hard times drew us because the children seen us in a different light. Children seeing me in a different light and seeing how I reacted, and it was puzzling in some instances, because why is he so calm in this when this is going wrong? Because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, I'm showing you, and being the model of that again, you're gonna go through storms in your life, and you're
yes,
gonna have to be the strong one, no matter if you're scared or afraid or unsure or what's to happen or come, that you got to show your child or children that all is okay. It may not appear to be, may not feel like it, but all is okay. And I always stress this to Lonnie the third. I tell him, he be like, Dad, is everything good? If it seemed like that, I'm a little overwhelmed or upset, and I be telling him all the time, all is well. Everything is good. If I'm around, it's good. And it again is more of to reassure him of that
yeah.
male figure in his life.
Mhm. You know, it's funny, we were talking about this today, and today I talked to two different people who actually it wasn't today, it was this week. But today, yes, two, but was today Wednesday? I think Monday, maybe another person, a third, who talked about being in a blended family, and in each situation, when things got rough, the man packed up and left.
Wow.
One of the things that I can say, and we've been together for 16, 17 years, 17 years, 17 years, but married for 16. You never done that. You never done that. And I'm grateful, and the children, even if they don't know, they need to be grateful, because what I realized about hearing about those situations is that messes with the security of everybody. The woman that's involved, the children. It says that we have a conflict, we have a disagreement. He's going to leave. He's not. It doesn't solidify your place in the family. In each situation, it was the man coming into the family,
Right.
pack up and leave, come back. And it just was like this ongoing cycle. And that I believe happens a lot too, especially with a lot of young parents and young blended families. What would you say to men who either they do that, they have that habit of leaving and coming back, or those who contemplate walking away?
Well, first and foremost, it shows or it instills fear and a state of instability in the child, even if they don't know what it is, because we can just reminisce on things that we have gone through, even if it didn't have anything to do with parenting, but what our parent, as far as absent parents, but what our parent may have gone through in the household. And then as male figures, you take on because you want to be that savior. You want to be the one to help and to relieve that pressure on your parent when, again, you're a child. But what I will say to males that either contemplated it or actually done it, if you are modeling the fact that you are the man of this house and these are you have accepted and accepted the responsibility of that these are your children, um, put your foot in their put yourself in their shoes.
Yes.
If they walked away, how would you feel? That's how I look at things when being practical. I don't like to be mistreated, so I'm not going to mistreat others. Now, will that stop the fact of me may ever being mistreated? Absolutely not. But the principle and what I believe in, my foundational compass and moral compass is I'm not going to do that. So the same thing applies with those that contemplate it. And again, you're not a bad guy because you contemplated it or it
Yes.
crossed your mind. But you have the control and the ability to not allow it to become, the act to act upon that feeling or that thought. But
Yes.
again, be reminded of the children. Now, again, some instances it's necessary to walk away and don't come back because some things are toxic and it's non-healthy and not healthy for neither the male or the mother and the children. But for those that may go through hiccups and storms and stumbling blocks and things of that nature because there's a new male in the picture,
Yes.
consistency. And also be honest and open to your spouse or to your companion, how you feel. And a lot of times, us as men, we want the Superman syndrome or the Superman physique of wanting to stay strong and be strong and appear strong. But a woman can see again your imperfections. A woman can see the chinks in your armor. That's not saying she's going to love you less. But again, if you be open with her, again, communication to let her know that, listen, yes, I did think of that. But and not saying tell her that in the sense of and induce fear, but let it be known that, I don't want that.
Yes.
But it did cross my mind, and if it doesn't cross your mind,
The
by all
ones.
means, praise God. But again, put yourself in the child's shoes. It would probably be better that you never came into their life than you to up and go that drastic. Why? Because they're already fighting the father that's not there, the biological father. Now that you come involved, it makes them feel like that's why I didn't want to let my guard down. That's why I didn't want to accept you because you did the same thing that my father did.
Yes. Yeah.
Think about the child.
Point. That is a good point. And also by letting your partner know this is how I feel. Because feelings, just because you feel a certain way doesn't always mean we have to act on it.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that that's another thing that's helpful because that person can help you to not act on the way that you feel, knowing you really don't want to. But if we just keep it a secret and it's just on repeat and replay in our mind, it's going to drive us to do the very thing that we don't want to do. So I think that was really helpful, Lonnie, for you saying it. And I, again, appreciate you coming on here talking about this. Anyone who have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to us and we will definitely follow back up with you.
Absolutely.
And also, if you need help for your family, whether it's counseling, professionally or in the church, whatever it is that you need, we do have the resources to guide you in the
Yes.
right direction. So we thank God for our show on today as the topic fatherhood,
Mm-hmm.
helping men navigate being fathers, whether you're becoming a father, you're a new dad, or you're stepping in as a fatherly role model. Whatever it is not easy. So we thank you again for listening. Those who have watched, please like, share, and subscribe to this broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And as always, thank you for taking the time out to listen and to give feedback. So we until next time, we will see you or talk to you, interact with you next time on Life More Abundantly. Thanks
I
again.
wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
And males, my brothers, whether I know you or don't know you, the greatest thing and the greatest accomplishment for a male, a lot of people think is achieving of your successes and the things that you go after. But the greatest achievement and the greatest thing to ever experience and to conquer is fatherhood.
Yes.
So conquer it and go after it, pursue after it, and have the desire to want to be the best father that you can be in God. That's it.
Amen. That it's worth the struggle. It's worth the fight,
Yes.
the conflict. It's worth it. Well, until next time on Life More Abundantly.
Thank you for watching or listening to this week's broadcast. Join us next week as we take you further along the journey of healing, wholeness, and wellness. To learn more about the services of Abundant Life Holistic Wellness, or to book or engage with Pastor Sheena one-on-one, or make further comments or inquiries, please visit our website at restoreabundantlife.com. To stay connected with us, please follow the links to our social media outlets below. Again, thank you for watching, and we hope you join us next week.